Hello, everybody, and welcome to Red Wings Daily, presented to you by FanArch. I'm your host, Kirk MckNight, author of The Voices of Hockey, Broadcasters Reflect on the Fastest Game on Earth, and coming to you from the southwest corner of Washington State, 2,454 miles from Little Caesars Arena. Now, before we get to the action from last night at LCA, I want to thank everyone for tuning in and subscribing. Our numbers are continuing to increase every day. Our viewership, our subscribers are jumping by the dozens really right now. So I want to thank you all. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I'll continue to give you guys Red Wings content, NHL content, however it is. Today's Tantrum Tuesday. That's a special day as far as exciting news that we share, sometimes not necessarily relegated to Detroit. So we'll talk about that in the third segment of today. But like I said, any kind of input you guys want to give us, we're welcoming it. Anything that you want changed, something you want a little bit more of, something you want a little bit less of, we're always open ears about that. And thank you again for subscribing, and thank you again for viewing. Now, back to last night's action. It was a pretty extensive game as far as on ice and off ice, if you will. Even though all the celebration before the game was happening on the ice, I still call it off ice because of a mental kind of standpoint of the game. But last night's game did go into extra frame. An overtime win by the Red Wings over the Carolina Hurricanes. But before the game, very important, the fact that they retired. That's right, number 91, Sergei Fedorov, my favorite player growing up as a Red Wing fan. And I have waited for a while. I've sat there with a little bit of trepidation for several years, just wondering, I hope nobody, comes over to this team in a trade, dons the number 91, because I want that to be kept aside and kept sacred and safe. It's like the ring in Lord of the Rings, keep it secret, keep it safe. But no, keep 91 out of the rafters unless it's got a Fedorov written across the top of it. And that's exactly what happened last night. Very emotional game going in, because obviously with all the greats there to celebrate Fedorov, Yzerman down there on the ice, you got the boss down there, and you got a lot of the players back in the day. I saw Vladimir come out on the ice as well. Obviously an emotional moment in any arena in Detroit. Whenever you see Vlad out there in a wheelchair coming out, it brings up, a lot of old memories. Vlad played several years. Those two were on the Russian Five together, basically, as Red Wings. And so, a lot of emotion, a lot of history in the game, and the puck hadn't even dropped yet. But as soon as the puck dropped, a minute and a half in, JVR gets that goal. And basically, the Red Wings go up 2-0 on DeBrincat's shot, which went glove save. No, actually, it went stick side. But guess who was camped out on the glove side? That's right. If that shot would have bounced off, Kane was right there camped out right in front of Anderson, ready to put it right back in. So one of the two was going to score on that one. It just happened to be DeBrincat. And it just happened to be him retaking the lead from Larks for the team lead in goals. Now he's at 24. Larks is at 23. So we can only expect that Larks will get number 24 tonight against the Bruins. Maybe, maybe not. But a couple of things started happening, though. I mentioned yesterday's show that the Red Wings had a pretty bad period against Carolina in Carolina, which really shifted the tide of the game and really put it out of reach for the Red Wings. They had scored the first goal of the night in Carolina, but the Hurricanes came back and scored 3 straight and pretty much kind of got the edge back over them mentally, and the Red Wings really weren't able to recover. Well, luckily last night, the Red Wings were the ones jumping out to a 3-0 lead. But once again, the Hurricanes, a 3-goal period, forced overtime. And a lot of this has to do with the special teams, or should I say lack thereof. Now, last night on the PK, the game-tying goal by Gostischer basically had it at 3-3. But before that, there was a shorthanded goal by Seth Jarvis, and then there was a power play goal before that by Seth Jarvis. So basically, our special teams was in a slew of of mistakes throughout the third. And the fact that once Gostischer scored that goal to tie the game, they were still on the power play, because that was during a 2-man advantage. So there was still a guy in the box with the game tied at 3-3 and still play enough time on the clock for something to really be happening to maybe even take away these 2 what we thought were sure points for the Red Wings and maybe even turn into 0. But luckily they held off. They even had a power play in the last couple of minutes, weren't able to capitalize on it, forced overtime, and Copp gets the game winner. Now that one was a very disputable goal. There's going to be a lot of Carolina Hurricanes fans in chat rooms and in discussion boards really complaining about the no call and the cross check. I'm not going to be delusional and say, what are you talking about? No, it was clearly a questionable move and probably something that the refs should have blown the whistle on instead of swallowing it. But sometimes in those situations, the refs, when you go to the replay or whatever, you can't really do a replay on a no call. Now, if there's something about the crease, that's one thing, but the cross check isn't something that's really reviewable as far as I'm concerned. At least maybe. At least that I'm not aware of it if it is. But yes, they did get away with something. They walked away with the 2. Carolina still walked away with 1, even though they were basically trailing 3-0 entering the third period. So maybe they can take a little bit of solace in knowing the fact that they still escaped with 1 point on a road game against a division-leading team. They themselves are a division-leading team. It was all you can expect out of a matchup between 2 teams at the top, one at the top of the Metro, the other top of the Atlantic. The Red Wings stay at the top of the Atlantic, even though the Lightning won last night, and I believe the Canadiens won as well. Still basically 1 point behind the Red Wings are the Lightning, and 2 points behind the Lightning or 2 points behind the Red Wings are the Canadiens. Still amidst that Atlantic Division are the Boston Bruins, who are kind of hot right now, I guess. They've won 3 straight. The Red Wings have won 4 straight as of last night's win. But we have 2 teams that are basically getting a little bit of fire amongst them. The Bruins, like I said, have won 3 in a row. The Red Wings have won 4, and the Red Wings are 1-0-1 against Boston this year. And that one shootout loss is the start of what has become a very torrid successful streak, I'd say, from the Red Wings. So counting that overtime loss itself, the Red Wings are 15-4-3 since that night. Now, that was the night that I've talked about in previous shows when Mo Seider went after Kastelik, kind of like lighting a fire under the team. They were in the midst of a 3-game losing streak. That became their 4th game, in a row as losing. Still got a point, though. They were pointless in 3 games. They still got that point. They came back and won the next game against Boston. And since then, basically, like I said, since that overtime loss, they're 15-4-2. Some of the things to think about, Talbs is going to be in net, I'm sure. Obviously, every time Gibby's playing the night before and, they're playing 2 games in 2 days, they usually give the stick to Talbs and put him in the crease. He's 2-4-3 in his last 9 starts. It's kind of unfortunate because he started the season 9-2. We're all thinking that he had the hot hand, but then he started getting the cold hand, and it was the reversal of fortunes. Gibby has had the hot hand with 13-2 in his last 15 starts. So we'll just have to see. I believe Swayman is going to be in goal for the Bruins. The Bruins, amidst their 3-game winning streak, the only game that Swayman had to do with that was the 10-2 win over the Rangers over the weekend. The closer games against Calgary and Pittsburgh were by their other guy. But it looks like Swayman's got the nod for tonight. So Swayman and Talbs, we'll see how it happens. A couple of things to talk about. Offensively, the edge would probably have to go to the Bruins, but defensively, I'd say that the edge goes to the Red Wings. The injuries, Jordan Harris and Lindholm are both on the IR, and Geekie is day-to-day. And let's hope that day is one of those off days for him tomorrow, that he's not going to be playing for personal reasons, it says. So let's hope that those personal reasons continue, because I remember when we played them in Boston, Geekie was all over us. And Geekie is one of those players that is is amazing. Lightning, got a lot of offense going for him. He was taking the team by storm. Hopefully, like I said, he won't be playing tonight, but we'll see how that happens. Now, it's Tuesday, and that means it's Tantrum Tuesday. Folks, we're going to go back, and you're going to think, and if I do say tie every once in a while in this segment, you have to forgive me, because we're talking about a Domi in a Leafs uniform getting in a fight. Now, anybody who's ever been a fan of hockey over the last 30 years knows the name Ty Domi, and knows that he was one of the more notable enforcers in the league, and he played a lot of his career in a Maple Leafs uniform. Well, his son Max was drafted by the Coyotes years ago, and now he just happens to play in the same team that his dad played for. So Max Domi, not last night, but this was Saturday night. So this was over the weekend. It wasn't necessarily, over the last 2 nights, but Saturday night, Max Domi versus Marcus Pettersson. It was Marcus, I think, went after him first, basically looking, and it kind of aggravated Max, and Max gave him a few shots straight on, connected hard. I'll bet he had a little bit of pugilistic tutelage, courtesy of old Ty, to win that battle. But yeah, he took Pettersson down pretty hard, and that was in Toronto. So of course, the teams were both cheering on their fighters, but it was Max who had the win on that. Max, unlike Ty, though, is more of a goal scorer. Ty never really scored the goals. He racked up the penalty minutes. He's famous for basically fighting the guy who fell into the penalty box in Philadelphia. That's a part of the Voices of Hockey, a couple of perspectives from that actual incident. But it looks like Max knows how to hold his own, and so that was pretty much the marquee fight that I would say over the last few days. There was a couple other fights. Adam Lowry of the Jets against Keegan Colasar. No, was it Adam Lowry? Yeah. So Keegan Colasar, I believe there was a hit over Hayden Fleury that injured him, and it was kind of one of those, you got to answer the call. When they call you out to the fight, you got to answer the bell, and that's what happened. And to me, it's not so intense of a fight once the refs separated you, because Keegan and Lowry went at it. They went down, and basically it was kind of one of those acquiescing fights, really what it was. Lowry basically said, "Will you fight?" kind of thing. And Keegan, knowing the tradition and knowing, the unspoken rules of the game, said, "Sure." They even got into the penalty box, and Adam Lowry, you can see him looking. There's not this intensity between them across, penalty box to penalty box, but basically Keegan could see him thanking him for fighting him, and Keegan kind of gave him the nod. So I don't see the tantrum in that, but I also like to talk about the fact that there are these kinds of instances in hockey where the unspoken rules, and to answer the bell, and to right the wrong, I guess you could put it, and it's always expected. And so it's one of those, the gloves get dropped, and you basically are in that situation. You got to comply. So the other fight was Shen against Mark Stone of the Knights. It wasn't very intense. So I like to point to, Max Domi, just for old time's sake, to talk about a Domi in a fight, but getting the upper hand and taking down Pettersson. So we'll see what happens over the next few days for next Tuesday when we have Tantrum Tuesday again. But for now, it's kind of like turn back the clock, but leaving the name on the back of the jersey for the Leafs. Last night's game against the Carolina Hurricanes ended with Andrew Copp getting the game-winning goal. Like I said, it was questionable. Little cross-check in front of the goal to basically take out the defender, and to get basically just, it made it just an easy setup pass from DeBrincat for him to put in the back of the net and for the game winner. But let's not take away from what Copp has contributed to the team these last two games, because he's got a goal and an assist in each of these last two games. On the season, he's at 8 goals and 20 assists. So he's at 28 points, which puts him basically at a tie for 5th in the team, tied with Kaner for basically the 5th most points in the Red Wings. The top two, like I already mentioned, were DeBrincat and Raymond. And then you got Larks and Sider in there, and then you get Kaner and Copp. So, like I said, a goal and assist in the last 2 games, 6 points in the last 4 games, and he's really been showing it up on that second line. Playing in between Kane and DeBrincat. That's always going to help you get points when you are playing on a line. When you're the center and those guys are your wings, you got Kaner on your right, you got DeBrincat on your left. I mean, it's just a recipe for points to be scored. And he's also been doing great on the power play with Kane. on the second power play unit, and the two rooks and Casper. When I say the two rooks, I mean Finns and Axel. So Copp has been showing up. He's been creating points. Speaking of points, like I said, Kane is right there on tied with fifth with Copp. Kane got an assist last night, so now he's just 4 points shy of Madonna, or 4 points shy of passing Madonna, I would say. So we'll see what happens tonight against the Bruins. But once again, Copp is a perfect example of how deep the Red Wings are showing themselves to be. You know, the superstars are out there getting the points, the Larkins, the DeBrincats, those guys, obviously goal after goal. Raymond's out there getting all the points that he's supposed to be. Seider is just having a phenomenal year for a defenseman. JVR is looking quite resurgent and in double digit in scoring. Then you got the rooks in there like Finns and Axel contributing points. And you got Copp in the mix of all this too. Not necessarily a seasoned veteran like like Larkson and Kaner, but he's also not a rookie. You know, he's had a few games under his belt. But the fact that he is calculating and on this offense is showing a real depth from this team. I like what I'm seeing. Like I said, you know, they're still at the top of the Atlantic Division. They've got 4 wins in a row. They are just, becoming quite an effective machine. Minus that third period last night, over these last 2 games, you could say they were just playing on as on could be, and against 2 solid teams with Montreal and Carolina. So this has been Red Wings Daily. Tomorrow we'll talk about tonight's game against the Bruins. We'll have a little bit of a recap before the Red Wings come back and play against, I believe it's the Sharks later this week. But for now, this is Red Wings Daily. I'm your host, Kirk MckNight, and LGRW from the PNW.